Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Hey there. Today we're chatting with Coby Skonord, who's the co-founder and CEO of IdeaWake. Coby and I chat about IdeaWake's growth over the last 7 years, talk a lot about product market fit, talk about selling into a B2B context, talk about how to differentiate yourself in a crowded market, that migration of doing things that don't scale into a truly self-serve scale-up startup. Awesome conversation. Really enjoyed it. Hope you do as well. Check out IdeaWake at IdeaWake.com and find Coby on social media and tell him thank you for coming on the podcast. And thank you so much for listening.
This episode is brought to you by Full Stack PEO. Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Coby Skonord, who's the co-founder and CEO of IdeaWake. Coby, welcome.
Hey, Mike. Nice to be with you.
Why don't we start with a quick pitch for IdeaWake?
Sounds great. So IdeaWake is a software platform that helps capture, evaluate, and implement ideas from frontline employees, really centered around the idea that, people that are closest to the customer and to a process have the best ideas on how to improve that process. So we really just, foster that culture of innovation at the front lines of large organizations.
Go one level deeper on tangibility. If I'm a frontline employee at a target customer, what's my experience? What do I actually do?
Definitely. So we run these different initiatives that we call challenges. Those challenges are related to a strategic area of focus for an organization. So that's posted by leadership, and then employees are able to post their ideas under those specific challenge topics. Once an idea is posted, employees can collaborate around the idea as well as vote for it to increase its visibility in the community. And then based upon the ideas that are automatically surfaced by employee voting, those ideas are going to go through a workflow where they are routed to different leaders depending upon the type of idea that it is. Leaders can give it a go or no go, or evaluate it based on custom criteria. And employees get notified at each stage of the process where their idea is going and why.
Who's the perfect target customer for this?
Anybody that has over 100 employees is our normal minimum. Really, where it starts to get interesting is 250 people and above. Is really where we focus a lot of our time. But our smallest customer is 50 employees, the largest customer is over 70,000.
Nice. Dude, awesome. All right. And then that's a nice transition. Hit us with some current stats. Any kind of metrics you can share that paint a picture of the status of the company overall, how long you've been around, number of ideas that have been woke, if that's a thing. Like anything you can share that will help somebody who's listening understand where you're at on the journey.
I'd say that we're, in growth phase in terms of the journey. So some front level or high level metrics, software is being used in, 39 countries and over 185 cities last time we checked. So we're in 12 different verticals. Healthcare is a big vertical for us. So we have the largest health system in Wisconsin, Illinois, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa. And, we're currently at a total of 12 team members and been around I think it was our 7th birthday. I should know that. But our 7th birthday was October 31st. So just over 7 years old.
I've never gotten an actual birth date on the podcast. Why October 31st? Why did this company launch in October 31st?
Just serendipity. There's no rhyme or reason. I very explicitly remember it being, right before a Halloween party.
Got it.
I was at the bank and got it, everything, all the paperwork signed, opened up the account, got the articles of incorporation in that same day. So,
because I'm sure he's probably listening to this podcast. One of the co-founders, my company, Developer Town, would be remiss if I did not mention here that he specifically chose January 1st, 2010 to start Developer Town to launch Developer Town. We actually held off for a couple of months to get that launch date so he could have a binary launch date 010110 because that's the kind of geeks we are.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, moving along. That's an awesome update. It immediately makes me, just in terms of stats, want to ask, 39 countries? Talk like like that seems like a nightmare of translations and internationalization and stuff like that. How have you handled that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's at the end of the day, right? It's a vanity metric like you had said up front. And what it really focused, like customers are in much fewer countries, but they're global organizations. But to handle the internationalization of things, right? Platform could be translated. I think we're at like 9 different languages right now. So that was a journey all its own. But multi-language translation, making sure that you're GDPR compliant, or the CCPA that just came out, but that's within the States. So, I mean, there's a lot of different policies and procedures, legal compliance that you've got to make sure that you're aware of and follow. But that's why you got to make sure you have a good lawyer. Right
on. Awesome. Well, I love it. Even 9 languages is still pretty baller. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
So, okay, so let's get into the meat of the discussion. When you think of competitors for IdeaWake, who or what comes to mind?
Yeah, so I mean, you can look at the landscape, from our stage today, where we are currently, and then also where we're going. To touch on where we are today, I mean, a lot of people that are listening to this that aren't familiar with the quote unquote innovation management space will look to things like Slack or Microsoft Teams. Basically, those two are very popular and everybody is familiar with them. But once you go over 50 employees, it becomes really, really inefficient to use those types of systems. And then that's when people go over to a dedicated tool, hence why we have that 100-user minimum most of the time. But there are, a plethora of direct competitors that offer what would be called innovation or idea management software. Really what we focused on was ease of use, as well as, offering a lot of consulting baked in with all of our plans that come included in the subscription. We rode that out for, the last 5 years, and we're able to grow. Like I said, we're in 12 different verticals now, approaching, I think, like 32 customers. Now we're rewriting the entire platform. Just actually released it in the last 2 months. And that platform now is going to have product differentiation built into it. So from where we are today, really, we focus on strategic support and also just ease of use, not offering, all things to all people in the software, but can touch more on, if you're interested, where we're going as well.
Of course, I'm interested. Hit that now. Talk a little bit about why the rewrite, and then more about the strategic differentiation.
When I started the company, I got a developer who was a friend to work on it for free. Node.js, as well as it's called the mean stack. So it's Node.js, Angular JS, the first Angular, as well as JavaScript server and client side, as well as NoSQL on the back end. So not to get too into the weeds with the technical stuff, but that was not the right technology stack to go with, simply because we have very structured data in our system. And so we rode that out in that architecture and technology for 4.5 years. And my CTO has been saying for the last 3.5 years that we need to rewrite. So from a technical standpoint, we needed to do it. We also actually co-developed a second product and learned a lot from a relationship with Advocate Aurora Healthcare. And that product, to try to incorporate it into the current architecture and platform we had, I equate it to trying to fit a 40-foot yacht into a 2-car garage. So from the technology stack and scalability standpoint, we really needed to rewrite. But then also, in order to bake in some of our differentiation that we had co-developed with corporate partners over the last couple of years, we really needed to rewrite the architecture and the technology so it could scale.
And then I want to make sure I heard you right. Before, when you were talking a little bit about differentiation, you said that you were providing a lot of consulting baked into the services plan. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct.
Are you still doing that?
So currently, yes.
Talk a little bit more about that. What kind of consulting? What does that look like?
Definitely. So it's partially implementation and then continued success. So companies know that they want to implement these types of programs, but they don't necessarily, if they've tried it in the past, it's, a couple of reasons that they stopped doing it. One of them is that they couldn't get people to use it. Or secondly, they didn't know how to implement the ideas once they received them. It was too much, input, and they couldn't assign people or hold people accountable to take action on the ideas they received. And so what we really help do is actually build out not just, providing you with a tool and configuring that tool, but providing you an overall system. And I would say, from a piece of advice to folks, don't think about scalability in the beginning from 0 to 100K and MRR. What you really want to focus on is understanding the customer at a very, very intimate level. And just naturally, by us doing things that didn't scale, it really did give us the ability now to learn and get that intimate relationship, build really strong relationships, have low churn. And now we're automating all of that in this next version of the platform. So over the next 12 months, you're going to see a lot of the strategic support actually baked in to the platform for the end user so that it does become scalable.
And just give one quick example, if you can, of what an example of like this would have previously been done manually, and this is how we're automating it in the new platform.
Yeah. So to launch a new customer, we have something called the launch checklist. That's a series of, 10 different line items that we go through. It's everything from what questions do you ask and how do you make sure the questions that you're asking are going to A, get engagement, but then also B, actually produce a financial result to the company, all the way down to how do we promote the system and how do we communicate it. So all of that now, those 2 items, but also the other 8 that I'd mentioned, are baked right into the platform itself, so that end users, right, as they sign up, it starts taking them through that checklist and they click and it takes them step by step on how to configure the platform, how to promote it so that it works. And so people sign up and so that people continue to use it.
Got it. And then how's the product priced?
Yep. So a couple of different pricing schemes. So based on number of users being targeted by default. When you go over 5,000 users, we start to do administrator-based pricing with unlimited users. Product's also really commonly used externally. So standard use case, and when you look at our website, a lot of it is around employee-driven innovation, so employee ideas. But often companies will start there and then expand it out to customer ideas. When they do that, they're often going to go over that 5,000 user threshold.
Got it. Talk a little bit about your background. Why IdeaWake? Where did this come from?
Originally, we were talking about rebrands leading up to the call today. And basically where this started was in college, my junior year. I was thinking about reading a lot of books on crowdsourcing and also just, wisdom of crowds. And from there, what ended up happening was just had this spark, right? The spark came over a series of, several months of researching this, but I was in my parents' basement and was like, why can't we crowdsource the product development process? And that is what eventually became Inventilator, which was the first iteration of the company, all the way now to IdeaWake, 2 rebrands later. And my background, personally, I went to UW Whitewater and majored in accounting and finance.
And if I'm a large health system, I implement this. Am I looking for? And I'm sure your answer to this is going to be yes. I'm looking for all these things, but maybe provide a little bit more focus or editorial where you can. But am I looking for like, okay, we're just trying to eke out, incremental process improvement? Like, how do we just get 10% better in a given process or area of the company year over year? Or are these big innovation challenges like startup weekend, but inside my company where we're going to find whole new product lines, whole new ways to serve the community, the customer, whatever that is? Like, how do your customers typically think of leveraging a product like this?
It's actually split about 50-50. So, and it's gone more towards performance improvement in times of COVID. But we're seeing, the new product and service innovation start to, make its way back. Some companies doubled down on doing, the more disruptive things since their entire business model was disrupted as a result of COVID. But it's been more focused on performance improvement lately. We're normally at about half and half when we're not in a COVID environment.
So COVID is interesting. Do you have a feel for what, just from an employee engagement perspective, does engaging with a tool like this help people feel less nervous about their career and their company because of COVID? Because this is like a way to engage, and like it's a very tactile, hands-on way that you can engage in solving the problem? Or does this create anxiety because maybe companies are surfacing problems that need to be fixed and putting, instead of being out of sight, out of mind, it's in front of the employees?
So from a standpoint of employees, like having fear of retribution is one thing, but also, being less engaged as a result of this, we really have not seen that at all. Simply, part of it might be, the companies that tend to work with us are going to be companies that either already are communicative with their frontline staff or they have a desire to be communicative with their frontline staff because of the fact that our system naturally is open-ended feedback on specific topics. So we really have seen overall, like during COVID, we have a case study that's coming out. We helped improve employee engagement by, 9 percentage points, specifically for learning and development. And that's according to McKinsey's Organizational Health Index. And we've done that now in 2 industries. One of them is healthcare, and then the other industry is actually hospitality. So it does definitely, we can, tie it to measurable data points or outcomes where it really does help increase engagement in COVID and non-COVID environments.
So outside of COVID, if I'm a customer and I'm using IdeaWake, how am I measuring the success of IdeaWake year over year? What am I looking for from an ROI perspective?
The answer everybody loves to hate, it depends. So it's really based on part of the assessment we do up front is what are you trying to get out of the system? Why are you implementing it? Normally, it's going to always be either growing revenue, reducing costs, but always a common thread is increasing employee engagement. There are other ways to grow revenue and reduce costs other than going to frontline employees. Obviously, we're biased towards, that being one of the best mechanisms to do innovation for several reasons, which we can get into if we have time. Those are the common threads. Really, in the beginning, what we're measuring is engagement rate, quantity of ideas that we're receiving. And then from there, you go into after the first, 3 months, number of ideas that are getting approved and number of ideas that are getting implemented. And then looking out 6 to 12 months, you start to look at for performance improvement, some type of ROI, whether that's an improvement to quality, whether it's an improvement to net promoter score, or whether it's time savings, error rate reduction, something you can really tie a hard cost to. So it's a journey.
Do you feel like you have product market fit with IdeaWake today?
I would say yes. Most definitely.
Why?
Part of it's MRR, customer success, customer testimonials, case studies that we have, the fact that we're talking to, some of the largest companies in the world and getting success with them. It's, also looking at customer retention. So, just from those metrics, right, and also our growth rate over the last couple of years, even through COVID.
When was the first time you felt like you had it?
That one wasn't as concrete in my mind as, the founding of the company or the origination.
October 31st.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a process, right? So, you have indicators. I just mentioned, I think you rattled off like 5 different indicators, right?
Yeah.
But it's not something where you have a clear indication of it. We're still modifying our processes, the solution. We've seen pretty much every request and really, like I said, intimately understand the customer, but I would try to look at a couple different data points when, if somebody else is listening to this and evaluating whether they have product market fit. You can look at an MRR number, right? So like when we started hitting like the 30s, low 30,000s, you knew that you had something, right? Also looking at growth rate year over year. Then also looking at, most importantly, longer term customer retention. I'd say going off of those 3 metrics, you can start to determine whether you've got product market fit or problem solution fit.
Coby, does IdeaWake have any cool swag or things that you give out to clients or employees?
We do. It was, we were swag-less. I was wearing, I put on an IdeaWake shirt. I was wearing our original, I think 3 of them were made in Ventilator sweatshirt, which is the original iteration of the company. But we just started doing swag, I don't know, a year and a half ago. because we knew we weren't changing our name.
Finally settled on it. Nice. Yeah. I like it.
The product market fit, that was another indicator.
That is actually a great indicator. I never thought of that before. That's great. Mm-hmm. And so what's your swag of choice? What do you guys at IdeaWake prefer?
I mean, we're pretty standard, man. We got t-shirts, sweatshirts, and then we did blankets that were supposed to go out for Christmas last year. We normally do like a client gift at the end of the year, but I'm actually looking at them right now, right across from me in the conference room. So those never made it out, but yeah, blankets are like the most. Well, we also do mugs. I guess, yeah. Amanda has done quite a few things now.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're not going too crazy on it. I mean, we don't dedicate budget to it. It's just, a couple, like $1,000 a year, I'd say, we're spending on swag.
Perfect. Well, if you're listening to this and you need to get swag for your company because you've finally settled on the name that you're going to use going forward, you can go to fuelmerchandise.com and mention Startup Competitors, get 10% off your first order. So the thing that's interesting to me about that answer. Well, maybe I'll start here. So I interviewed Matt Wyrick, the founder of RealLink, maybe a year ago now. It's been a while. I asked him about product market fit on accident. Like it just came up. They had built RealLink to do, a thing one way, and they had been successful at selling it, and they had grown to, pretty reasonable MRR and pretty reasonable customer retention, and pretty, like all of the signs of life were good. And if you were an investor, you're probably pretty happy. And then they decided to pivot, and they completely changed the way that they engage with customers and kind of the core thesis of the product. And when you listen to Matt, it like just completely unlocked growth. And maybe this is my romanticized memory of that episode, but in general, this was the moment that I thought I need to ask more people about when they knew that product market fit, because from all outside perspectives, you would have looked at RealLink and said, you have product market fit. Why in the world would you change the product? And what Matt's answer to that was like, it was so hard to sell. Like we had to sell. He's like, I knew we didn't have product market fit because I had to sell every single customer. And to keep them as a customer, we had to have customer success that, worked in the business to keep them, to keep them engaged and keep them using it. He and the team felt this tremendous resistance to using the product. And he's like, once we made this pivot, all that went away. Like customers came to us. They started sharing it with other people. We never had to do customer success anymore. I shouldn't say that, but like customer success got easier. And he was like, it was like this, the ability to grow just became so much more apparent and easy. So I have that floating around in the back of my head, which is why I asked the question. And then the thing that is particularly interesting about IdeaWake is, when we opened the conversation about competition, you said there's lots of competitors in the market. Many people do this, including Slack and Team. If you're not fully steeped in the space, you might think Slack and Teams could be a competitor. So there's a lot of options. You want to build strategic differentiation into the platform going forward, which is part of the rewrite, as well as the data problem. And so it's the thing that has me wondering, like the thing that is really interesting, and certainly by all of your metrics, you're right. You have product market fit. I'm not saying you don't, but the thing that's really interesting to me on there is like, where in that obfuscated journey did it happen, and why did it happen? Like, which of those decisions do you think made that happen? Okay, so I've been talking for like probably a minute. Hopefully, you've been thinking in the background. What's your answer to that?
Definitely. I'm going to try to parse the different pieces apart, and also kind of talk back to, the last point that you were, kind of making. Product market fit is a stage in the journey, right? Once you have product market fit, you got to figure out how to scale it.
Yep.
And that's really the phase that we're at, is going, from product market fit / starting growth to really being able to accelerate that growth rate. So trying to parse out some of the things that you were saying, like the pieces where we're running, where people have run into these issues in our systems, which we found out from having the intimate relationship with the customer, really comes around implementation of ideas and getting buy-in for implementation of ideas. So we have to focus a lot on customer success, and there's a lot of support that goes into that process. And what we found, once again, was we never touched on the secondary piece of the product offering that we actually have. It's essentially, if you think about a startup accelerator, right? Imagine that startup accelerator program inside of your organization. So what we do is actually we run these campaigns, and then once the ideas are selected, we actually co-developed a product with Aurora Healthcare that enables a frontline employee to take that idea, validate it, prototype it, and then actually pitch it to somebody in the organization that owns the budget for implementing it. So it's an end-to-end system for corporate innovation. It can be applied externally once again as well.
Yeah.
But going off the point of, right, it's really hard to sell, and then you have to focus on customer success. Really, like what we're doing with this rewrite is trying to take a lot of that support out, and with the assumption it's going to really enable growth. Kind of one more thing on that too, talking about the sales cycle in general, like we're looking at for, smaller deals, you're looking at a, 45 to 60 day sales cycle. And series of 3 meetings from a sales process standpoint. Varies, right? But looking at averages, that's about what we're looking at. You have a lifetime value of a customer over $50,000 for us, so we're not looking at $50 a month deals. Minimum deal size is normally about $9,000 to $10,000 a year. with that, one of the things that we've really been thinking about and is enabled by the rewrite is how do you create a self-service version of IdeaWake? That's something else that will be enabled by this new infrastructure is, right, you come in just like you would Slack, and you can actually sign up for an account, enter in your credit card information, and just off to the races with the strategic support and automation built into the system. I think we might have different definitions of product market fit to a point. I think that we are where the previous organization that you mentioned was at the, inflection point of going from product market fit, quote unquote, to like actual true growth and scale.
Got it. Talk a little bit more about that transition to scale and what that's been like. So when you think about, what needs to change in the coming 6-12 months from an operations perspective, paint that picture for me.
Fleshing out the rest of the rewrite. So like I said, it's live, it's in production. We have customers on it, but really we have 6 more months of development that we want to do in order to get it where it needs to be. So that's going to be a piece of it. But then also, right, just being able to continue to fuel growth on that new platform and the growing pains that are going to be associated with it. Anytime you're, porting your customers over to a new system, there is going to be a learning curve associated with it. The new system and old are very similar, but just, we have to transition all the data. We have to make sure that all the data transition happens smoothly, do a couple onboarding meetings with folks. So that's going to be the biggest challenge over the next, I'd say, 6 months. That's, in tandem, obviously, with the change. It's not change in market needs, but really just the COVID environment. Its demand for the product went up significantly, but it results in a lot more noise in the sales process versus signal because everybody wants this now because they see the value in it. The value of it's gone up. Nobody has budget though, right? Budgets have gone down, value has gone up. So it's really just continuing to parse through that and tweak the business model until we can capture more of the market from, I'd say, the 100 to 250 employee range. Once again, that's all in the plan. That's what the self-service is all about. We're not going to turn off our non-self-service options, though. I'd say that as you make the pivot, right, like you had mentioned with the previous organization, you want to dip your toes in the water. You want to validate primary assumptions that you have around opening up a new avenue for your business model before throwing all of your resources at solely pursuing that.
Got it. What's been I guess for you personally, as you've been doing this for 7 years now, right?
Yes, 7 years.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for 7 years. What's been the biggest challenge for you personally in terms of growth? And that could be, something related to the business. That could be something personal, whatever that is. But when you reflect back on like, oh man, how did we get here? What were some of the highlights there that you're like, I'm really happy, impressed, whatever, that I was able to figure this piece out? What are some of those?
Feels like just yesterday. I would say like for personal growth, right? We can go through major inflection points in my journey personally, but personal growth, I'm really good at sales. I love building things. But I did not know nearly enough about technology in the first iteration of the product that we developed, and didn't have, the infrastructure in terms of team or resources in terms of dollars behind me. So learned a ton early stage about building things. And then, the inflection point for us really was the pivot from, going from my original vision of what I wanted the product to be, and what I wanted the company to be, and transitioning it from a public-facing, helping entrepreneurs build new things, to an internal-facing inside of large organizations, helping the organizations foster innovation internally from employees. So I would say it's figuring out when to be stubborn and when to see the writing on the wall, which is immensely more easy to say than it is to do, especially if you are a founder and you are incredibly passionate. I mean, I put in my 2 weeks on the first day of training at Ernst & Young, right out of college, worked 5 years for that job, graduated like top 5% of my class at Whitewater.
Dude.
And so, I mean, you have to be very headstrong and like, essentially you got to be a little crazy, but that craziness is combined with stubbornness. And that's really where a lot of founders end up floundering. So we were in the abyss, right, for about 2 years in the original iteration of IdeaWake. And I would say the biggest thing that I could, and this is what I preach every time, do one of these is really to make sure to focus on understanding who your customer is and making sure that your customer is going to pay you for your solution, right? And if you can't prove that out within the first 6-month period with a basic minimum viable product, you got to start thinking about how to pivot the product in order to make money off of it. Easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is go B2B versus B2C. Even if your vision is to go B2C longer term, there's always going to be a version of your product 95% of the time that you can sell to businesses, which enables you to either raise money if you want to go that route, or it provides the ability for you to feed yourself and your family if you have it.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
That's awesome. All right. I know that we're just about out of time. If folks would like to learn more about IdeaWake, or if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can either go to our website if you want to learn more about the company in general. It's IdeaWake, IdeaWake.com. Or, if you have questions on whether it's, something about entrepreneurship or running corporate innovation programs inside of your company, you can actually just reach out to me on my email, which is Coby, C-O-B-Y, @IdeaWake.com.
Awesome. Coby, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
And Mike, my pleasure. Thank you very much for the time too. Appreciate it.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.